بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا. فما بعد, my brothers and sisters, we continue with our series of classes on the lives and the standard of the Sahaba of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his companions. I remind myself anew, in the last class we talked about the Asbab al-Nuzul, the circumstances of revelation of the last ayat of Surah Al-Baqarah, which give us a framework of what it means to be Muslim, which is Sami'na wa Ata'na, we hear and we obey. The pledge of the Sahaba is the standard of the Muslims, Sami'na wa Ata'na, we hear and we obey. Now, as I mentioned before, also in the last class, there is a confusion in the minds of people about the issue, and people without knowledge, basically, who, may Allah protect us from ignorance, about the issue of compulsion in religion. And when they are reminded to pray or act according to the tenets of Islamic law, they claim that there is no compulsion in Islam and that Allah said so. And they quote the ayah, لا إكراه في الدين قد تبين الرشد من الغي فمن يكفر بالطاغوت ويؤمن بالله فقد استمسك بالعروة الوثقى لا انفصام لها والله سميع عليم. In Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, there is no compulsion in religion. Verily, the right path has become distinct from the wrong path. Whoever disbelieves in at-taghut, which is false deities, and believes in Allah, then he has grasped the most trustworthy handhold that will never break. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all hearer and all knower. Now, this question and argument clearly underlines for anyone the importance of studying the Quran systematically, and not simply cherry-picking ayats to support their own assumptions and prejudices. The Asbab al-Nuzul, the circumstances of this ayah, are clear about who this ayah refers to. The Banu Nadir were a Jewish tribe that lived in Medina, and they controlled the market, especially the jewelry trade. They were also considered to be the most learned people of Medina, that is among the Jews, the most learned of them. They had a lot of rabbis among them, and they were signatories to the covenant of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is the oldest written constitution in history. This covenant promised mutual protection and cooperation to fight together against any external aggression. The Banu Nadir, however, they violated the covenant, and though the prescribed penalty for treason in this case was and is to this day death, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not apply that, but instead he banished them from Medina. Now there was a superstition among the Arabs, or some of the Arabs of Medina, that if their children were brought up by the Jews, they would be healthy, and so they used to leave some of their children with the Banu Nadir to be brought up by them. There was infant mortality, high infant mortality among the Arabs, so they left some of their children to be raised by the Banu Nadir. So when the Banu Nadir were leaving for Khaybar, the Arabs came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they asked them what they should do with their children who lived with the Banu Nadir. Should they allow them to go with them, or should they take their children back? That is when this ayah was revealed. It refers specifically to the presentation of Islam to those who are not Muslim and orders that they are to be left to choose without any compulsion. Interestingly, there is a note on this ayah from the Mufassirin, which says that the term deen denotes, when it says la ikraha fi deen, it denotes both the contents of and the compliance with a morally binding law. Consequently, it signifies religion in the widest sense of this term, extending over all that pertains to its doctrinal contents and their practical implications, as well as to man's attitude towards the object of his worship, thus comprising also the concept of faith. The rendering of deen as a religion or faith or Islamic law depends on the context in which this term is used. On the strength of the above categorical prohibition of coercion, which is ikrah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, La ikraha fi din, there is no coercion in anything that pertains to faith or religion. All the Islamic jurists, the fuqaha, without exception, hold that forcible conversion is under all circumstances null and void, and that any attempt at coercing a non-believer to accept the faith of Islam is a grievous sin, a verdict which disposes of the widespread fallacy that Islam places before the unbelievers the alternative of conversion or the sword. So this should be clear for anyone who has any doubts in this matter, that there is no such thing as conversion by the sword in Islam. If somebody did that, and people attempted it and so on and so forth, and some people may have converted because they feared death, that conversion was not valid, and Islam does not permit any such way of converting people. Now clearly this refers to people being given a free choice to enter Islam or not. For those who have chosen to enter Islam, it tells them that they have taken a strong handhold leading to guidance and light. They have made a conscious choice, so naturally it makes no sense to say that after entering Islam you will do some things and not other things. Selective obedience is disobedience. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specified His law for the believers, where He said, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu dkhulu fis silmi kaffatan wa la tattabi'u khutuwati shaitan innahu lakum aduwwum mubin. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, O you who believe, enter into Islam completely and perfectly, obeying all the rules and regulations, and do not follow the footsteps of shaitan. Verily, he is to you a plain enemy. There is no there's no doubt about the fact that shaitan is an enemy is our worst enemy, and therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, do not follow shaitan and don't follow in his footsteps. Now interesting thing here, if you reflect on this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not say don't follow shaitan. He said do not follow his footsteps. Now think about this. Why is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying do not follow his footsteps, right? Because the responsibility of following footsteps falls on the person who is following those footsteps. When you say don't follow the footsteps, it means clearly that the one that you are being told not to follow is not there. Right? Is not there. If the person was there, if the individual was there, then you would say, do not follow him. Do not follow this person. You won't say, don't follow his footsteps. When you're saying, don't follow his footsteps, it means that the person who you are following is not there, which means that you completely and totally bear the burden of that decision. You can't blame it afterwards, say, well, so and so misled me. No, you chose to follow the footsteps. And especially when you were shown that these were the footsteps of your worst enemy, now why would you follow those footsteps unless there is a problem with yourself? So, the position of the Sahaba, the position of the Muslims has always been Sami'na wa ata'na ghufranaka rabbana wa ilayka masir. Oh Allah, we hear and we obey. We hear and we obey. We hear and without hesitation, without delay, immediately, instantly we obey. No matter what we feel about whatever we are hearing. There may be a command which may feel difficult for us, which we may dislike, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows the khair in it, therefore we will follow it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَأَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُ شَيْئًا فَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ وَأَسَىٰ أَن تُحِبُّ شَيْئًا فَهُوَ شَرٌّ لَكُمْ وَاللَّهُ يَعْلَمُ وَأَنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, it is possible that there is something which you dislike, but there is benefit for you in that. And there is something that you like, and there is harm for you in that. And Allah knows and you do not know. So therefore, when we say Sami'na wa ata'na, we are saying this with complete and total certainty that we are obeying the command of the one who knows more than we know, who knows better than we know, and who loves us, and who only and only commands us to do something which is beneficial for us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not randomly command us to do this or that, which may possibly be harmful for us. Allah only and only tells us and commands us to do something which is beneficial for us. Now, the confidence to make the choice to grab a handhold that will not break comes from the ayah which precedes this ayah, the ayah which precedes La Ikrah fi Din, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala introduced Himself in the most magnificent ayat of the Quran, which is known as Ayatul Kursi. All of us know that, all of us have memorized it, and those who have not memorized it, you must memorize it. This is an ayah which is called the greatest ayah of the Quran because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala introduced Himself in this ayah. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to fill our hearts with His glory and majesty which comes in this ayah. And then this ayah also is protection. Rasulullah said, whoever recites this after the first salah, he said the only thing that is between that person and entering Jannah is his death, meaning as soon as he dies, he will go into Jannah. So it is recommended that we recite Ayatul Kursi as the last thing we recite before we say Salam, Taslim in Salah, and the first thing after saying Astaghfirullah 3 times, the first thing we recite after we say Salam. So we cover both aspects of the last thing to be recited in Salah is Ayatul Kursi, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for Jannah by doing this. Also, Rasulullah recommended that we recite Ayatul Kursi in the night before we go to bed, and he said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will then guard the person with 70,000 angels. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's qudrat, Allah does not need to guard by any means, but this is the way of showing the honor that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestows upon the one who recites Ayatul Kursi. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Allahu la ilaha illa huwa al-hayyul qayyum, la ta'khudhuhu sinatun wa la nawm, lahu ma fi samawati wa ma fi al-ard, man dha alladhi yashfa'u 'indahu illa bi'idhnihi, ya'lamu ma bayna aydihim wa ma khalfahum, wa la yuhituna bi shay'in min 'ilmihi illa bima sha'a, wasi'a kursiyyuhu as-samawati wal ard, wa la ya'uduhu hifdhuhuma wa huwa al-'aliyyul 'azim. Allah said, Allah, la ilaha illa hu, none has the right to be worshipped but He, Jalla Jalaluhu. Al-Hayyul Qayyum, the ever-living, the one who sustains and protects all that exists, the one who will never die, the one who is established. Neither slumber nor sleep overtake Him. To Him belongs whatever is in the heavens and whatever is on earth. Who is He that can intercede with Him except with his permission. He, Jalla Jalaluhu, the glorious and magnificent, knows what happens to them, to his creatures in this world, and what will happen to them in the hereafter, and they will never compass, they will never know anything of his knowledge except that which he wills. His kursi extends over the heavens and the earth, and he feels no fatigue. He doesn't get tired in guarding and preserving them. And he is the most high, the most great. He is the highest and the greatest. After introducing himself, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave people the choice to choose him over the worship of creatures. In my opinion, that is not even a matter to think about. Who in his right mind would choose anyone other than Allah when he knows Allah? And therein lies the catch. Do you and I know Allah? And that is the reason why it is so important for us to spend time with Allah, to spend time in dhikr, to spend time in remembering Allah, to spend time in reflecting, in introspecting, in looking at the universe, the creation around us, and bring the glory and majesty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala into our hearts. Now, once the choice is made, once we have chosen to grab the handhold that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, then we have chosen to choose Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala over anyone and everything else, and alhamdulillah, I make the choice, and I ask you also to make the choice. Once the choice is made, the consequences of choosing one or the other, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that also. Allah said, Allahu waliyul ladhina amanu yukhrijuhum min az-zulumati ila an-nur walladhina kafaru awliya'uhum at-taghut yukhrijunahum min an-nuri ila az-zulumat ulaika ashabun nari hum fiha khalidun. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Allah is the wali. Allah is the protector and the guardian of those who believe, the people of faith. He brings them out from darkness into light. But as for those who disbelieve, their awliya, their supporters and helpers are the taghut, the false deities and the false leaders that they have chosen. They bring them out from light into darkness. Those are the dwellers of the fire, and they will stay there forever. My brothers and sisters, we are free to choose, but the choice is never free. Every choice has a price tag. Every choice has a consequence. So choose wisely. Don't grab the handhold that will break and then let go midstream. Right? You will be swept away and you drown. Once you grab the handhold, hang on until you have reached the other side, which is Jannatul Firdaus. Is that enough reward for you and me? Where else do you think is the destination of the one whose wali is Allah? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that He is the wali of the believers. The question is, do we want Allah to be our wali? Now, it looks like a stupid question, but look into your life. Let me look into my life and tell me, and you tell yourself whether that is really, if that really is a stupid question. Right? What's the question? Do I want Allah as my wali? Is that really a stupid question? Ask yourself. Because if you want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as your wali, and I want Him as my wali, and He said that He is our wali, then why do we insist on angering Him? Why do we insist on disobeying Him? Why do we insist on being rebellious? Now, how do you explain this? The Sahaba, Ridwanullahi alayhim ajma'in, may Allah be pleased with all of them, understood this, and so as soon as they learned something, they acted upon it. As soon as they learned something, they acted upon it. Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu is a fine example of this attitude of always walking the talk. It is reported that he slaughtered a camel and invited everyone to a meal when he completed memorizing Suratul Baqarah at the end of 12 years. So just one surah, 2.5 juz, he took 12 years, and at the end of 12 years he finished memorization of just the surah, not the whole Quran, and then he gave a walima, he gave a dawat, he gave a party, he slaughtered a camel, and he invited all his friends. Now ask yourself, why it took someone whose mother tongue was Arabic 12 years to memorize one surah, which is 49 pages. I mean, it's just under 2.5 juz. Just that long. When our youngsters memorize the whole Quran, 600 pages, in less than 3 years. Right? 49 pages takes 12 years, 600 pages takes 2 years. So someone asked him this question. They said, why did it take you so long to memorize this one surah? And he said, by we he means not only himself, he means all the Sahaba of Prophet, whoever learnt from him, alayhi salatu wasalam. He said, we used to take 10 ayats from Rasulullah. Then we would memorize them and reflect on them and understand them and apply them in our lives, and we would seek clarification if necessary. And only when we were satisfied would we go to Rasulullah for the next 10 ayat. Now think about this. The first thing that strikes you is the sincerity with which they approach the Quran. This is the true adab of the kalam of Allah. Not wrapping it up in silk or satin cloth and kissing it and touching it to your eyes and forehead and placing it on a high shelf. The Quran al-Kareem came to be understood and applied in our lives. Not simply to be memorized by rote without understanding and then recited mechanically. The adab of the Quran is to apply it in our lives. This was the hallmark of the Sahaba. This was the signature of the Sahaba. This is what made them stand out. They were the walking, talking reflection of the Quran. There was no gap between knowing and action, knowledge and action, between ilm and amal. What they knew, they practiced as soon as they learned about it. Right? Whatever they learned, they practiced. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu narrated what happened when Rasulullah revealed the ayah prohibiting the consumption of alcohol. He said that Abu Hurairah narrated, and also Anas bin Malik narrated this. And Anas bin Malik said that he was pouring wine for some of his guests when this surah was revealed, this ayat was revealed, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu innamal khamru wal maisiru wal ansabu wal azlamu rijsum min amali shaytani fajtanibuh la'allakum tuflihun. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, O you who believe, intoxicants, all kinds of alcoholic drinks, all kinds of drugs and whatever intoxicates, all kinds of gambling, whether it's cards or roulette tables or horses or greyhounds or whatever, all forms of gambling, all ansab and all azlam, all kinds of fortune telling, all kinds of tarot cards and feng shui and vastu and shastu and all that, and all azlam, which is arrows for seeking to bring good luck or decision making. All of these are an abomination of shaitan's handiwork. I mean, it's not just bad stuff, this is the most evil of it. So avoid it strictly. Allah said, stay away from it, that you may be successful. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminded in the next ayah, Allah said, إِنَّمَا يُرِيدُ الشَّيْطَانُ أَن يُوقِعَ بَيْنَكُمُ الْعَدَاوَةَ وَالْبَغْضَاءَ فِي الْخَمْرِ وَالْمَيْسِرِ وَيَصُدَّكُمْ عَنْ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ وَعَنِ الصَّلَاةِ فَهَلْ أَنْتُمْ مُنْتَهُونَ. Allah said, Shaitan wants only to create enmity and hatred between you with intoxicants and gambling. Now remember, just think about this, how clear it is, right? You get drunk, you fight, you do gambling, cause loss to each other. So Allah says Shaitan only wants to excite in enmity and hatred between you with intoxicants and gambling, and hinder you from the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and from salah. So will you not then abstain? Right? Now Anas bin Malik radiallahu anhu, he says, I was pouring wine into a glass, and as soon as I heard this ayah, I moved my hand so that the wine poured or spilled onto the ground. They were sitting, he said there were people sitting with me with wine in their glasses. They threw it on the ground. Some had taken a mouthful, they spat it out. He said, then we brought out the wine jars and poured all the wine out into the drains. The drains of Medina ran with wine, and then we smashed the jars. All the Muslims who had wine in their homes, in their houses, in their warehouses, he said, they did the same. Now, someone informed Rasulullah ﷺ about this action of the Sahaba. He called them and asked them why they had smashed the jars, as there was no need to do that, since the jars could have been washed and used to store other things. The Sahaba replied, Ya Rasulullah, we didn't want to leave anything behind to remind us of the time when we used to drink. Now, just reflect on this. Alcohol is a drug. There's several points here to reflect on. First of all, we have heard this story of how the wine was poured and it ran in the drains of Medina like a river. Now think about that. How was there so much of wine in Medina in the first place? And that's why I say to you that in Medina they had a winemaking industry. And this is true across the world. Any society which grew crops with a high sugar content, with fruits, always had a wine-making industry. Now, whether it's apples, whether they make cider, they make wine out of that. A cider itself is halal. I mean, don't get confused with that. But when if it's allowed to ferment and so on and turn into wine, then it becomes a problem. Grapes, go anywhere in the world, all countries and societies which grow grapes have a thriving wine industry. The vineyards are raised for the purpose of producing wine. So also with dates, very high sugar content and therefore ideal for making wine. This is what the people of Medina used to do. They used to make wine. And that is why there was so much wine in the first place, it threw away. Now the point here is, this ayah at one stroke destroyed their livelihood. It destroyed their entire economy, because this was a society which was based on the sale of wine, and it was made haram. They did that. They didn't fight that. They didn't say, Ya Rasulullah, show us an alternative industry, show us an alternative business, and then we will give this up. No, Allah said, do it. They did it. They did not hesitate. They didn't think about how will this affect my family, how will I feed my family, because they knew Allah. They said, if Allah has told us to do something, there is benefit in this, and this cannot be wrong. Second big issue is, many of them, for example, Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab, he came from Makkah, but he was also in Medina. He said about himself, and this is true for anyone then and today who drinks alcohol habitually daily. He said, if it had not been for Islam, I would have either died in a drunken brawl in a bar, or I would have succumbed to something like cirrhosis of liver. And so obviously he did not say cirrhosis of liver, but meaning some disease connected with alcohol. Right? And this is true for everyone. That's why alcohol is so evil. It destroys the individual, it destroys families, destroys relationships, create all kinds of enmities. Now, alcohol is a drug, which is a horribly addictive drug. And it's so bad that alcoholics cannot just leave their addiction. And many have to go into special de-addiction clinics to break the habit. The famous global organization Alcoholics Anonymous says that you can never actually cure an alcohol addiction. All you can do is keep the person away from alcohol and make sure that they never touch and never go near alcohol again. Don't even be in the same room as alcohol, because they say that even if you were an alcoholic, you went into this de-addiction program, you were, within quotes, so-called cured, you remained cured for 20 years, then you have one drink and you are back in the same mess. It is as evil as that. Alcohol consumption in the COVID years, for example, in the United States here, 2020, 2021, alcohol caused more deaths alcohol related deaths than COVID. But COVID, we all fought it, the government fought it, the whole world fought COVID, as indeed they should have fought, but alcohol is legal. It's a tax deductible expense, right? In a business setting. It is legal. Now, deaths were more than the deaths thanks to COVID, but we are not even talking about the people maimed, the people paralyzed, the people who were injured and therefore became handicapped. They could not recover from the injuries. All of that is in addition to the number of people who were killed. Yet alcohol is legal because big money is involved, and when money is God, then everything else becomes permissible. This is how senseless our society is, and that's what we need to fight. It's extremely painful, and de-addiction is very painful, and it is long, it's difficult. Now, question here is, in this case, the Sahaba were, many of them were alcoholic because they used to consume alcohol routinely and habitually, but as soon as the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was revealed, they broke that alcoholism, they broke that addiction instantly. How did that happen? Right? How did they give up something that they had done all their lives and they were addicted to? That is the power of obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you want to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sincerely, He opens doors to make that obedience easy. The sincerity of the Sahaba was such that they even broke the jars, which they did not need to break because they did not want to leave behind any reminders of their days of disobedience. Now, what about us? Now, this is the sync between knowledge and action. Completely, they are integrated and they are connected, that I mentioned, which was the hallmark and the secret of success of the Sahaba. I remind myself, you, that in the end, it is only action which produces results. The rest is only noise. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us to act on what we know and not become collectors of information, which, if left unpracticed, will become proof and evidence against us before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyil kareem wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.